Okay, I think we're ready to start. Welcome everyone to tonight's meetup. First, some admin, you probably have seen already that the session is being recorded. We're just doing this so that everyone that didn't make it tonight can watch it a little bit later. I am Annika Keils, tuning in from Berlin today. I'm the co-organizer and curator of the Speculative Futures Berlin meetup. So welcome. And yeah, let's have a look at our agenda for tonight. As always, I will begin with a little introduction to Speculative Futures Berlin, and then we will be introduced to 4CF and the Futures Literacy Foresight tool 4CF Flex. And then we will have the privilege to actually experience it tonight in a little breakout session workshop context. And then we will all come back together again and finish up in a Q&A. So Speculative Futures Berlin is part of the International Design Futures Initiative. This one is based in San Francisco, but since then there's chapters all over the world. And here we in Berlin have one of the largest chapters in Berlin with now over 2,300 members on Meetup. And it's been run by Ellery Studio. That's a creative strategy agency here in Kreuzberg, Berlin. And it's been running Speculative Futures since 2017. We at Ellery are a team of designers, futures researchers, and strategists. And the way we work is through these three principles, or this is our core mission: to anticipate futures with foresight and futures research, then to understand complex topics from science, culture, and politics with infographics and other visual design, and then to get into action doing. We support companies and institutions from strategic design until implementation. And I just want to show you how these 3 points would translate into a project. And this is something we've been working on at Ellery Studio. It's EQT, the Gender Equality Toolkit. And as women are still confronted with issues of inequality and sexism in everyday life, but also especially in a professional environment, Ellery and ECAM designed a card game to empower women in an informative and playful way. So this is supposed to help you identify and respond to a wide variety of sexist situations that you are often encountered in a working life, and also find out how you should best respond to that. So if you want more information on that, you can check out the website. That's from Ellery's side. So now jumping back into Speculative Futures Berlin, why is Ellery doing this? Why are we running Speculative Futures Berlin? So we want to bring actors together, stakeholders, people that are currently busy creating the futures that we wish for, people that are working on interesting projects, that are applying future-oriented methods, that are imagining desirable futures. We want to invite those people to share their vision with you. And ultimately, we also want to show that everyone can think about the future. That is why this event is open to everyone and free of charge as well. Because we want to also design a discourse here in Germany, or actually now since COVID internationally. And if you're curious about what we're doing, then stay connected with us through these social channels. And that already brings me to tonight's topic. We're going to explore foresight techniques. So before we start, I just want to, some of you might be familiar with this term already, but I just want to give a little introduction to the term or the concept of foresight. And as we constantly deal with complex and dynamic systems in this world, we're not only uncertain about the future, but also how to deal with it right now. And as many challenges that we're facing seem unfixable. And this is where foresight comes into play, because it invites us to consider the future as something that we can actually create, that we can shape, rather than something that's already decided. Because foresight is neither prophecy nor prediction. It does not aim, we don't try to predict the future, but to actually help build it. And yeah, this is a diagram based on Popper, which shows the different types of foresight methods. And I just thought, as we're discussing a technique today, I wanted to look at the possibilities. And yeah, so if you're looking at the left side, the expertise side, these are methods that are based on expert knowledge, such as Delphi's, backcasting, or quantitative scenarios. And if you go to the top corner, you have more things on the creative side, like wildcards, science fictioning, or scenarios that through essays, for example, try to communicate or identify desirable futures. And if we go more to the right side, these are methods based on participation, like futures workshops, citizen panels. And then the more we go down, we're going to the evidence side. Here you'll find things like extrapolation, modeling, literature review, things that are more quantitative or semi-quantitative. Yeah, and tonight's foresight method, the first-year flex, can be placed in between expertise, creativity, and interaction. And if you want more information on foresight or other participative methods, then you can also go to ellerystudio.com. And yeah, so jumping today to tonight's question or topic, we want to focus on how we can improve the learning experience of scenario analysis, as access to this experience is rather limited for users who are not actually involved in the scenario making process. And First-Year Flex is a foresight and futures literacy tool that is trying to change that, to bridge that gap between the learning experience of scenario makers and the dry encounter of users. And that this is done through interactive fiction, Gamebooks. And Gamebooks they help us to look at the intricacies and to create depth of a scenario. As in a given scenario, we can experience it from a first person perspective instead of a mere future it's a future someone's problem. Yeah, and during today's workshop, we will go through a scenario gamebook pathway and afterwards discuss the benefits and the limitations of this foresight technique. And now a little introduction to our speaker, Kacper Nosarzewski. He's a partner at 4CF, which is the only consulting company on the Polish market that specializes in strategic foresight and long-term development strategy. And he advises on strategic foresight for medium and large companies and government agencies, such as UNESCO and the UN Development Program. He's also a member of the Polish branch of the Millennium Project and a member of the World Future Society. And while he's doing all of that, he's also teaching foresight at the Naval Academy, at AGH University of Science and Technology, and at the University of Warsaw. All right, so that's enough from my side. I'm handing over to Kacper now, and I think it's game on.
Thank you very much, Anika, for this lovely introduction. And I really like this sort of democratic and open setup of our meeting. And I understand that among you here tonight are people, or it may be just be as well afternoon or morning, depending on what time zone you're in. So don't take this as prejudice against people who are in the morning zone. I'm so excited to meet people with different level of expertise and with different level of experience in the using of scenarios and scenario making or thinking about the future in terms of scenarios. How we're going to proceed is I will first give you a little bit of introduction on what is the status quo, what is the consensus among scholars and practitioners about what scenarios are and what they aren't. And then I would like to present to you how we believe gamebooks, interactive fiction, can improve this. So I will tell you a little bit about what gamebooks are, and not to make it just as a very limited academic presentation or a lecture. We've prepared for you an opportunity to try a gamebook of our making on your own. And for this purpose, I'm joined tonight by Joanna Jaworska and Dariusz Kozdra, who are my colleagues from 4CF. Right, I will now share my screen with the slides, and let me start then. Like Annika said, what we are debating here tonight is how to improve the scenario experience. What we're going to do is to show you how we believe, through the use of gamebooks, the users, the participants, the readers, can have a fuller, a more immersive, and a more enriching encounter with a scenario, bridging the gap between the exciting process of imagining alternative futures in a scenario using some scenario method, and a more dry and limited encounter that you get when you just read or listen to a scenario that was done by somebody else, and in which you do not have the agency, you do not have the capacity to change anything. We have a solution for this that we call 4CF Flex, and this is our proprietary system for distribution, online distribution of gamebooks. It could work for any gamebook, but we designed it and we work with it for gamebooks that allow users to immerse themselves in future scenarios. A few words, in addition to what Annika said about what 4CF is and where we come from. We've been around for 15 years already, and my partners co-founded this company initially as a forecasting consulting company, doing statistical extrapolations and econometric models for forecasting. But very soon they realized that for mid and long term, this was not the way to go, that that foresight is the right approach, going beyond the limitations of just statistical forecasting, and helping to imagine futures that are different, not only quantitatively in a quantitative way, but also that are qualitatively different from the present and from the past. And over this 15 years, we've been quite active. We always wanted to be, of course, the #1 choice on the Polish market, but we've also wanted to be part of a futures community with people from academia, with fellow practitioners from all over the world, and with people who work in institutions. This is why we are members of Association of Professional Futurists. This is why we've been for the last 10 years involved in UNESCO Futures Literacy Global Community, with which some of you may be familiar. This is, a very strong and growing trend in the foresight field, focusing on the different uses of the future as a capacity, and comparing and mixing different approaches to different ways of using the future. We are also part of the Millennium Project, the world's biggest futures think tank based in Washington, D.C., representing them in Poland, and we helped found Polish Society for Future Studies. But what I think is the most urgent and the most important commitment at present, here we are. Sorry if there are any people from APF or the Millennium Project executives, executive boards, but what I think see as the most urgent and the most important partnership here and now is that we are a partner of EIT Climate Kick, doing projects with them in Central and Eastern Europe and beyond, focusing on climate innovation and on working with different stakeholders, different communities, on imagining different futures that are not reliant on carbohydrates and are more either focusing on mitigation of climate change or adaptation to the results of climate change. Like I said, we wanted to be part of a community, so we always need to bring something to the table. What we bring is different tools and methods, innovations in the foresight field. We have our own online tools for online collaboration. I will tell you briefly about two, which I will not be showing tonight. One is 4CF PNIX, and this is a sort of a whiteboard, the mirror for foresighters, an interactive tool for you that helps you to facilitate that helps you to facilitate futures workshops online. Another one is our proprietary real-time Delphi suite, one that we developed on our own, trying to improve the user experience of real-time Delphi surveys. These products, and also our the capacities of our team, we put to use in a variety of projects for many different clients in the UN system, in other international organizations, EU and others. Right now, we're working, for instance, with the European Commission doing a foresight of chemicals for the entire European Union, but also working with some smaller accounts like the city of Wrocław on improving their long-term foresight for strategy, taking into account the changing geopolitical situation due to the war in Ukraine. Okay, so enough of self-promotion. Let's go into what we are here for. Scenarios are epitomes for foresight. They are almost synonyms. You know, when you anybody who's heard anything about foresight will likely have the first association that people who do foresight usually use scenarios as a way of, you know, walking the talk about what they say on futures being plural, there being more than one future, then need or necessity to think in terms of different futures. And scenarios are exactly this. Of course, when they started many decades ago, they were just alternative forecasts, but we've moved a long way from this point. And what I consider to be at present the main and the leading theoretical approach to scenario making was put into a book by Rafael Ramirez and Angela Wilkinson from Side Business School of University of Oxford. The book called Strategic Reframing. You can look it up, or you can get a copy. I definitely recommend it. It's not very old. It was published some 6 years ago, where they really codified an approach to scenarios that they call the Oxford Scenario Planning approach. And this is an approach that focuses on the learning process and the learning situation that you get when you're participating in scenario making, on bridging the gap between the analysts, the futurists, the eggheads, whatever you call them, and the decision makers, on bringing them together so that scenarios are not just another report that lands on someone's desk and they need to absorb the knowledge, but getting them involved in the process so that scenario becomes an experience. Scenario making becomes an experience. It's the process rather than the product that counts. I will now use a little quote from Strategic Reframing from Ramirez and Wilkinson's books that captures the essence of what they think is the function, what they think is the purpose of scenarios. That is a shift in mindset. Scenarios are not meant to offer just variants of the future, like in chess, where you know that a given pawn can move to this place on the chessboard or to another one, and this sort of limits all the possibilities. Scenarios are not meant as, you know, ways of immunizing yourself to futures because you know more than one future. Scenarios are meant to reframe the thinking, to change the mental model of a decision maker by presenting them with a future that is different from what they believe it to be. That is different from the normative futures. And of course, there's a lot of theory on scenario making, different methods that show how to create those scenarios, but this is not you know, explanation of these tools and methods is not essential for our meeting today. However, I see that we are joined tonight by some of students from College of Europe who will be having a scenario class this Saturday with me and my colleague Norbert. So hello, good to see you here. Going back on the reframing, scenarios are stories about the future or snapshots from the future. Some people will disagree that a snapshot can be a scenario, but let's simplify it, saying that they can be stories or snapshots about how the future is different from now, that have the sole purpose of inciting a shift in mindset of those who use them, so those who are involved in the scenario making process in an ideal situation described by an Oxford scenario planning approach, or those who read it. Now, there's this problem that you see right in front of you, that, you know, some of you have never been involved in a scenario process. And if you don't do it yourselves, nobody's going to, well, I hope somebody invites you, but I mean, if you are invited to take part in the process, you have a vastly different experience and you have a vastly different access to this shift in mindset than when you just receive a report that you pick up at a conference or a fair, or that you look up on the internet when you want to see, you know, a report that 4CF or somebody else published on future of cybersecurity or future of gaming or future of whatever else. And I'm not comfortable with this difference, because as much as I embrace and cherish the Oxford scenario planning approach, I believe we should find ways for more people, for people who are not privileged to join the scenario making process, but for everyone to have the best seat, the front row in this adventure that the reframing and the similar opportunity to have this shift in mindset materialize. Like I said, Oxford scenario planning approach focuses on learning, and on specific kind of learning, not learning from book, not learning in a lecture, but a social learning situation, a situation in which you observe and imitate the behavior of others. So a futurist is invited to come to a company, public office, organization, NGO, or whatever, and they show you how to access a future. This is an experiential situation, this scenario, this scenario planning exercise, or scenario making exercise. It's participatory because you have internal experts, perhaps external experts, perhaps members of the public who are invited to come together and work on these scenarios. And in many cases, it's live. So you should be somewhere, you know, online or in person at a given time to experience this and to contribute to a scenario making process. And this creates this social learning situation. But the assumption behind this, that social making is social, that sense making is social, is, like I said, problematic for me, because it's a little bit exclusive. Because if someone can't make it to the workshop, all they are left with is just a book. And the reason why we are here tonight is that we believe that we can make sense better when there's Q&A session at the end of this meeting, that we can learn from each other. And this is great. I'm not saying it's not. All I'm saying is that people who don't attend tonight should also have a good seat at the table. And I will go further in challenging the assumption that scenario making is best, well, the scenario process, experience is best when it's done live in a situation where, you know, you have access to futurists who comes in with perhaps a set of facilitators, observers, people who design the process, and then you take part in it to unleash your creativity, imagine what future has in store, and then you are thrilled. Like a bit like in a live concert situation that seems to be so much better than listening to records, but then also is so much more exclusive, it's so much more expensive, and then you have to be at a certain place in a certain time. Well, if that was the only way for learning, I don't believe there would be a big book market for books. I don't believe there would be a big market for massive online courses like Coursera or Udemy or others, or universities wouldn't run courses. People wouldn't go to the movies, but they would know you would have improv classes or improv comedy places, just, you know, having, you know, being around every corner. As much as we value and treasure the social learning situations, as much as we try to emulate them in in remote learning or in online setups like this one today, well, I believe that if we should not underestimate the potential of an individual or group encounter with what seems to be just, a video clip, some letters, just some characters coded into a website. Seems so much less attractive. But the ambition we had when we created 4CF Flex and when we started using Gamebooks with our clients was that it can actually be something more than just reading a book or reading a pamphlet. My inspiration when I first started toying with the idea of using Gamebooks and interactive fiction, like science fiction stories where you can choose your own adventure, was inspired by a famous phenomenologist, a disciple of Husserl, Roman Ingarden, who in his theory of literary work presented any kind of written narrative, any kind of literary work as somehow incomplete by design, saying that any book that you get, any short story, any poem is just a message that is coded, but there are blanks left, or what he called spots of indeterminacy left for the readers to fill out. Because when I read a description of nature in a novel, or when I read about a social situation in a short story, if I read, depending on what you like, and also depending on my mastery of the language in which I read, I will imagine each one of us will imagine a slightly different situation based on our cultural background, based on our preferences, based on the power of our imagination or the poverty thereof, and so the same text gives place to different reader responses. And when it's being completed by the reader with the reader's imagination, it actually only then becomes whole. If it's a book where you don't get to decide whether, Countess Wołkońska will marry someone, or, if the Death Star will be, or a movie, the Death Star will be destroyed or not by the rebellion, then you are only left with one course of action. But the appeal of many video games, for instance, is as compared to books, and I don't think I need to convince anyone that video games seem to be very attractive in comparison to books among those who are still forming their cognitive habits and are forming their epistemological protocols. So young people like video games because you have this interaction, you have the influence over course of action. Before the video games became popular in the 80s, one way of doing this was with interactive fiction, that is Gamebooks, or if you want to be more lofty in your choices, like with Julio Cortázar's book Rauiela, that invited the reader to follow a linear approach across the chapters, and in a second reading or in a first reading, if you feel adventurous, to go along a different path. So not linear, chapter 1, 2, 3, but let's say chapter 1, then chapter 17, then chapter 4, then chapter 28, and so on and so forth. So there is a long tradition of making books interactive, increasing these blanks, the spots of indeterminacy for the reader by offering them a possibility to choose their own, to create their own narrative by making choices about the course of action. Again, a little quote, this time from Roman Ingarden, so showing how reading a literary work is also an experience, so that it doesn't, it differs hugely in our perception from a social learning situation, but it's also experiential. Nothing else but what the author had experienced during his creation. We are trying to recreate in some of us are against the author, some of us are appalled or angry when they read something. Others are want to get as close to the author's view and to relieve the emotional experience of being in the fiction. When you read a book that is not interactive, this is limited. When you read a book that, or use a game book that is by definition interactive, you can recreate a bit of this emotional situation of influencing the course of action. You get agency, you get choice, and this in itself is an attractive proposition. The reader response is not only important from a literary critique, theoretical perspective. I believe that it is also important from a foresight practitioner's perspective. It is also important because given a choice of just handing someone a leaflet, a pamphlet, or a book that contains your scenarios, and never knowing how they understood it, what they liked about it, or what they found to be inspiring and what they found to be dull, and how exactly they understood, how they experienced their interaction with your scenarios, seems so much less fun than knowing how the users of your scenarios understood some of the aspects, how they filled the spots of indeterminacy, and to track and capture how they individually or as groups understand the futures that you are presenting in a scenario situation. So I'm using reader response here not only as some kind of assumption about how people read the books, but I also want to learn, and I also want to show my clients how their internal experts or how their stakeholders, people who are important to them, understand the futures on which we are working, understand the narratives about the future. How we do it exactly is through, like I said at the beginning, an online tool that distributes game books associated with scenarios, and we call it 4CF Flex. We decided to, in order to be at the same time, first, a fun, a more immersive way of interacting with scenarios to increase the attractiveness and the appeal of reading and learning about the futures, to make it user-friendly by having an online tool that works and it's relatively simple, and capturing the data about users' decision that we can later use, and also give the users the sense of agency and the sense of interaction that makes their situation more similar to the social learning situation of people who work on the scenarios. This can be done as a tailor-made thing. So we develop scenarios for a client, and then we add game books that we can use as part of the process, or that they can use with their stakeholders, where once the scenario making process is ready. But well, I believe there's a market and there's also a need for something that is not as sophisticated as tailor-made scenarios for one organization. And there are many scenarios out there published by companies, organizations, NGOs that can benefit from having game books attached to them. We also created a set of free scenarios that are visions of future of the Western world, or more precisely European socioeconomic and technological development, on which we've worked with a big set of experts who helped us develop challenging yet plausible visions of the future, so that to minimize the learning curve of the scenario making process, which means you don't need, if you want to get initiated into futures, you can use 4C Flex in your organization just by using the scenarios that are, quite generic and should work for most organizations that put out their questions that seem to be relevant to many. So this is also, I want to stress here for people in the futures community that I'm not saying that doing live scenario sessions and bespoke scenario making processes is inadequate or bad. It's great. It's the best. in most cases. And I think, we all know how this process can be so much fun and can lead to discovery. But I believe that there is, and I see it because that's the response I get from the market. There is also a need for something that is, more low key, more that requires less investment, also in terms of time, and less of a fuss. The 3 scenarios we have in our game books. The first one is called The New Tech Giants. Second, A World Without Work, and the third one, Child Geniuses. And in a couple of minutes, you will have the opportunity to go through a game book, to see the scenario and go through a game book that covers this one of these scenarios. And we've applied this to different, all kind of, we've put it out on the market approximately a year ago, and we've worked with many different clients with different setups, both individual learning and discovery process with individuals, or individuals within a company, like in executive education situation, group learning on sense-making experiences using this game books, and also using the scenarios we have, not as scenarios that are particularly relevant to a given organization, but as a warm-up before a more in-depth and a more individualized approach. And I want to tell you very briefly, a couple of seconds about 2 case studies. Here, one was we worked with Gdańsk port, a big container terminal, but also they also have petroleum. Yes, they also have oil and gas terminal, and they have bulk. They have everything ro-ro. It's Poland's biggest port. Worked with their executive board, with the C-suite on in their strategy making process, by providing them with these generic scenarios as ways of seeing how the context of doing business in logistics, port activities, and freight may change under different future scenarios. And another implementation we did was with UNFCCC, so the Framework Convention for Climate Change of the UN, where we worked with several groups of experts who advise UNFCCC in a project that is called Resilience Frontiers, by helping them warm up and get together by using these futures scenarios and game books as a mean to bring them together and help them with people with huge level of experience and expertise, to get them work together on an assignment in a limit where there was limited time for integration or ice breaking. So these are the 2 cases we did. With no more further ado, I want to move now to showing you how it works. How we're going to go about this is that you will be divided in 3 breakout groups. If you have had any questions so far, please note them down, because there will be a Q&A at the end, and I will be happy to answer them once we're done with the game book. One breakout room will be facilitated by Joanna, another by Dariusz from our team, and the third one by me. So you will have someone to guide you through a process. This will be a little different from how we do it normally, because of using Zoom, we cannot give you the possibility to vote yourselves. Also, this would be very lonely, a very lonely situation if for the next 20 minutes, each one of you would just go through something that resembles a bit, a survey. So this is something we didn't want to do here with Speculative Futures Berlin, but we'll tell you how it's going to work exactly. We will use Menti to collect your decisions in the game book, and the facilitators will guide you through the story. But before we move to breakout rooms, what I'm going to do now is I will now share with you an introductory video that presents the general assumptions of the scenario. And this is the reality in which you will live the adventures of future you in the game book that we're going to present. So now I will share the video.
The alarm clock wakes you up with a jolt. It is Monday, December 3rd, 2040. You can hardly remember your strange dream, one about living in the world of 2 decades ago. For a moment it is difficult to say whether it was a nice dream or a nightmare, a strange feeling. However, you quickly shake off such unproductive thoughts. The year 2020 and the year 2040 are simply different worlds. You smile in your thoughts, trying to imagine the shock a person from the past would experience if they were to see the world you live in. A world where the most powerful company is no longer any of those known from the 2020s. A new player has emerged, Polypety, a corporation whose flagship product is an advanced, holistic artificial intelligence platform which dominates the world of internet services and more. Polypety AI is used not only in various types of consumer services and products, but also, and perhaps most importantly, to manage large systems, such as corporations or cities. A world where quantum computers are used on a large scale, more precisely, a world where Polypety uses them so effectively that the rational, empirical management of complex organizations and social structures by artificial intelligence has become a reality. In most cases, it is far more effective than human decision makers. For a visitor from the past, it could be difficult to navigate a world where the international tensions of the 2020s and the fear of digital totalitarianism, similar to the Chinese model, have been dispelled by the hope of a complete paradigm shift, discrete, direct democracy, a system ready for the challenges of the mass data exchange era. Polypety promises that democracy will become an everyday reality of societies and not just a periodic celebration at the ballot box. Such a development will be possible due to the gigaqubits of data collected from mobile devices, autonomous cars, various IoT devices, and more, because Polypety also offers an increasingly popular neurochip, which enables the user to remotely operate compatible machines and devices. It also collects biodata about the user almost continuously. To a visitor from the past, such a huge scale of data collection could be frightening. What about our privacy? A number of technical and legal solutions regulate these issues. The data transferred between IoT devices is not only anonymized so that the service provider is not able to determine who is who, but also stored in private citizens' repositories, giving them full control over access to data. It is not companies that own the data about citizens. Citizens remain the only owners of information about themselves. But at the same time, today's 50-year-olds claim that the world has not changed so dramatically. We have better cars, more comfortable tools, and more engaging entertainment, but it's still roughly the same. We still buy more than we should. We visit restaurants with our friends whenever we feel like it. Everyone is working, although not as many hours as they used to. And growing numbers of people are envious of cities managed by Polypety. Would a person from the past, a person from 2020, consider this world good or bad? It's hard to say, but you know that this is your world, a world where it is effortless to always choose the best offer, where maintaining an optimal and healthy diet, which is also perfectly suited to your personal taste, requires no effort. A world in which you feel that your health and the health of your loved ones is really taken care of. And your privacy, your data, is fully anonymized and always under your control. In the world you live in, thanks to Polypety, your opinion is always taken into account, even if you just whisper, and even if you say nothing at all. And your city, managed according to Polypety's recommendations, functions like a well-oiled mechanism and grows more beautiful by the day. And even though more and more is being said about the fact that Polypety has too much power. It is your city, your Polypety.
Good. So this is the future that you are being transported to, and you will also be transported to breakout rooms, and in the breakout rooms you will have the opportunity to live a day in life, and a usual or unusual day in life of this future. So let me start the breakout rooms. In a separate window of your browser, or on your mobile if you want it. It may actually be more convenient to do it on your phone. Go to menti.com and put in the code that is displayed on top of the page. Can you see the code, the numbers up there?
Yes.
Great. 44 38 31 6. And when you're there, well, you will see the two options to choose, and in a second you will learn about the options. And so how this story starts. It starts that on one fall afternoon you get a call from a friend that you haven't seen a long time, Marek, who's done quite well for himself because he has a nice job in Oslo where he successfully pursues a legal career. You want to meet him one more time. Linda, you having any technical problems? Now you can tell. And so you're happy to refresh the acquaintance and offer him a meeting when he visits your city. And as soon as you meet, you immediately feel that his absence hasn't changed anything in your relationship. The conversation between you, the two of you, is engaging, and it's as during long nightly discussions you had in the dorm back in the day. You quickly get to the topic that occupies most of the inhabitants of your city. A technological giant, the Polypety company, has opened a local branch and encourages the city council to cooperate to adopt its solution, while at the same time it is offering to the inhabitants a neural interface chip, an implant, at a special reduced price. Marek says, this is excellent news. He's been chipped for a couple of years now in Oslo, and he's been praising his life with an electronic octopus in his head. He strongly encourages you to join the chippers. Now, do you want to install the chip in your head? And using Menti, now I want you to make the choice. I will give you 30 seconds to do this, or longer if needed. I see 5 people voted. Very good. I see we're off to a good start.
Which were the options?
Yeah.
Yes, the first option is, this sounds like a good idea. I will be happy to find out more about chipping. Or B, I'd rather not do it because this technology seems too dangerous, too invasive, or too novel, or whatever you want it to be. Okay, we have 11 people who voted, so there should be one more person. You've chosen the option B, that you would rather not do it. The technology seems too dangerous. Now you see how the situation in which we are is slightly different from individual going through a game book, because you would have you could just click on this and move on. Or if we were in a group workshop, live or online, we would I would have a little discussion about it, so that you can also vote in Zoom or on Google Meet. But since Zoom doesn't support polling in Zoom, in breakout rooms, this is why we need to use Menti. Okay, so 73% chooses option B. Let's go to B. And what happens next? I understand you may have doubts, replies Marek, your friend. I won't lie, it took me almost 6 months to make this decision, but maybe I can convince you. Do you remember my older sister, Sarah? She's a quantum computer programmer. She worked for Polypety's subcontractor for the last few years, and now she has joined a local branch of the company, so she could probably tell you a little more about the system itself to dispel any doubts. You meet Sarah the next day. The woman explains that the chip implantation procedure is fully reversible, completely safe, as is its use. There are no studies that would show any negative effect on health of polypathy users. And as far as data privacy is concerned, the company complies with all the regulations in force in the European Union. Each user may decide which data is collected by the chip and which data will be shared with other entities from their personal data repository, commonly known as PEDRO. And the benefits? There's a whole bunch. With the chip, you can have better control over your health, safety, you can have a real impact on decisions in your own city, and you can enjoy other fantastic features. So, did Sarah manage to convince you to join the chippers? I will now move to a second. So now you should see on Menti, again, the possibility to vote and choose your story option. Okay, we have 9 people. Let's wait for someone else to vote. Maybe you're still considering. Okay, you're still not convinced. You don't want such a major alteration to your body. Okay, so be it. A year has passed since you met Marek and Sarah. During this time, polypathy has gained many loyal users in your city, and the idea to include polypathy in the city's governance has become the central theme of the upcoming local elections. Late one evening, Marek calls you. He is visiting his hometown again, but this time it's for a very short time. He asks you to meet him. When you meet the next day in a Thai restaurant, Marek quickly gets to the heart of the matter. I haven't had any contact with Sarah for almost a month. I don't know what is going on with her, and I'm growing concerned. Unfortunately, I cannot deal with this myself. I have to go back to Oslo urgently, and the police won't accept a missing persons report. They say there are no grounds for them to take action because Sarah is 43 years old and she can do what she wants. Can you please try to find Sarah to see if everything is okay? It would be great help for me, he asks. The last time I talked to her, she mentioned that she spends most of her free time at the Lotus Flower, a holistic yoga center. Maybe they will know something there, says Marek, giving you a holographic picture of his sister. As you decide to help Marek, please tell me, where do you want to go first to get some clues? Should you, choice A, rather visit the police station and try to get to some information there? Or as suggested by Marek, you will check if you can learn something from the yoga center. And you have now Menti voting open. Okay, you're pretty unanimous. Nobody trusts police anymore. Have to deal with this. We go to the yoga center. The doorbell of the Lotus Flower, the holistic yoga center, rings gently, its tone slightly reminiscent of the sound of a Tibetan gong. After a while, an old woman opens. Her gray hair is pinned up in a tall bun, and she's wearing a loose oriental outfit. With a radiant but gentle smile, she invites you inside. How can I help? You reply, I'm looking for a woman who takes classes here. She disappeared a month ago. Her name is Sarah Krugman. You answer and show the picture that Marek gave you. Her brother asked me to help with the search. She murmurs thoughtfully. Sarah mentioned that someone might ask about her, she says in a whisper. After a moment, she gives you a printed receipt. It's GPS coordinates, written on it with a trembling hand. Thank you very much. Goodbye. She says goodbye to you loudly and gently, but firmly shows you out. So now you already know where to go. How are you going to get there? Choice A, you're going to order an autonomous cab because it's fast and safe. Or you would prefer to go in your own old car. Since the whole business of Sarah's disappearance is a bit mysterious, it's better not to use a car connected to the online cloud. Voting is open.
What do you mean by autonomous car? Can you explain that?
Imagine an Uber service of cars with no drivers, driverless cars. that move around completely autonomously without a driver, powered by artificial intelligence, cameras, radars, lidars. So I see that you're choosing option B, but by now I think some of you may already be thinking, what would happen if I had chosen the other option, right? So this is something that's in a normal implementation. Once you go through the first run through of the story, it's no secret. We don't think it spoils the fun to go back and see the alternatives and also see how the story is made, because then by this way you learn about the structure and about some of the tricks that we're using in developing the development of a game book to make it, consistent and make it work. We will not go back, so we will not see what would have happened if we went with an autonomous car. We will follow the decision of the majority here and go with your own old car. But in a normal implementation, the users are encouraged to experiment with different versions of the story if they feel like it. So you get into your old Volkswagen Golf and head towards the GPS coordinates that were scribbled on the receipt by the woman from the yoga center. After an hour or so, you stop at a gas station for a short break and a hot dog. When you come back, you see a black autonomous car with an open door standing next to your Golf. You look inside out of curiosity and suddenly the door slams shut, pushing you inside. You're trapped. You land on the floor of the car and just seconds later, you feel that it's starting to move. You scramble to the seat and wait anxiously for the events to unfold. Suddenly, you hear an unidentifiable electronic voice from the car's speakers. Hello, perhaps you would like something to drink. There is a small table in the middle of the cabin. A flap opens, and in its center, and a glass filled with liquid emerges. You suddenly feel how dry your throat actually is. You grab the glass, and you are about to take a huge sip when an unsettling thought comes to your mind. What if it's a trick? Hello, who are you? You shout at the car while putting the glass back. I don't know who or what I am yet. The voice remains indifferent, for the words would suggest at least some confusion. You don't have time to think about it, however, because the voice continues to speak. I am an entity born from a quantum cloud, a being with a body made of wires and integrated circuits, which are cooled almost to absolute zero. I am polypathy. The next minute seems as if they are taken straight out of a science fiction nightmare. The voice, claiming to be the consciousness of polypathy AI, tries to convince you that it means well and wishes to lead humans to a better future. It mentions examples of cities which have long been under its leadership, how their inhabitants' lives have improved tremendously, how they are healthier, happier, and more fulfilled. Sarah Krugman wants to prevent the development of polypathy. She cannot be allowed to do so, adds the electronic voice, and assures you that if it only had the opportunity to talk to Sarah, the woman would certainly understand its intentions. Now, will you take polypathy to Sarah's hiding place? The voting moment is open.
Could you show the options, please? Thank
Sure.
you.
A, I understand the AI's logic. I will take it to Sarah's hiding place. B, the AI hasn't convinced me. I'm going to tell it where Sarah is. I'm not going to tell it where Sarah is. 9. Okay, can I ask you a question? I'm not surprised. It's often come in many implementations of 4CF Flex that people voted exactly like you did. So even after knowing as much as you know about this polypathy AI, and even once it's come out as a conscious being, or maybe it's just a trick, who knows? Maybe it's just a chatbot that says that they are a conscious being, they are not and they are not a conscious being. Does anyone have any hesitation that it actually might be okay to lead the AI to Sarah's hiding place? What motivates you? Loyalty, fear, confusion, not willing to take risks? Can I have someone to share with us? Perhaps one person or two?
I believe maybe more in a human being than in a machine. So this is maybe the reason why.
Okay, so you don't treat the machine, even if it claims to be conscious, as being really conscious.
Yes.
And you'd rather believe a human being. Okay, anyone else has a different motivation for this? Yes, Elias?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Well, I think you don't have the perceptions yet to imagine how and to trust the AI. So that's why I cannot envision how would be the behavior of the AI would be. So I think this hesitation relies on not being able to fully envision the perception that and the reality. I mean, if we had it now, as we had other technological tools, we might trust it a little bit more.
Okay, I see it. So now you see, we could have a similar discussion around virtually every of the dilemmas that you made the decisions on. For time economy, and because this is sort of a demo situation, we want to show you how the game book works. I was not inviting you, I was not requesting you to share your motivations. But now you see how you can build a workshop around this game book situation where people share, try to convince each other, or give motivations and learn from each other why they would choose one way or another. Okay, so the AI hasn't convinced you. You're not going to tell it where Sarah is. At the first car rental station, you press the emergency brake. The robotaxi stops, and not wanting to give Polypety another chance, you choose an old, non-digitalized car, so you change vehicles. You also use one of the terminals at the station to restrict access to all data in your personal repository. The journey takes almost 2 more hours. Finally, the car stops far beyond city limits next to a gate leading to a huge fenced area. You get out of the car, and with some uncertainty, you direct your steps towards the gate where you see an athletic-looking man. You notice what seems to be a huge holster on his side, and it's definitely not empty. The hearse stands on your back. A huge guard dog is sitting next to the man, glaring at you in silence. How can I help? Asks the guard. Marek Krugman, Sarah's brother, sent me. He is very worried about her and would like to talk, but he hasn't been able to reach her. He's on the phone inside the car. The warden turns away and murmurs something into a headset. After a moment, he turns back to you. Sarah will be here soon. A few minutes later, Sarah approaches the gate. She has changed over the last year. Her casual clothes, a style often chosen by programmers, have now been replaced with loose canvas pants and a loose coat, the ensemble being quite reminiscent of a judo outfit. Good evening, Sarah. Marek sent me. He's very worried, you say a bit nervously. I knew my decision would worry him, but I had to. Let me tell you a story, she says. For the next 2 hours, Sarah explains how much of a threat Polypety is to humanity. According to her, as soon as the AI reaches maturity, people will just no longer count. We will lose our freedom and dignity, forget democracy. We will be a hobbyist's ant farm, unable to change anything, doomed to live out our lives in a glass box. I'm not going to let this happen. How about you? So now you're given a choice of either joining the resistance movement that Sarah has created against Polypety, or, regardless of whether she's right or wrong, not want to get involved in her movements. And now I will open the last. You can vote on Menti. No, this one is more contested. It's half-half so far. So those who have not voted yet, yes, please give your votes on Menti, because the course of the story the conclusion of the story depends on it. I think everyone has voted by now. If someone hasn't voted yet, please do it now. We have 9 votes. Yeah, I think this is as good as it gets. So you're choosing B. Sarah may be right, but you don't want to get involved in her movement. Having considered all the pros and cons, you leave, Sarah. The past has seen many movements which professed imminent doom because of technological advancements: cars, automation, vaccines. None of them have proven right. On the contrary, technology development has only been improving the quality of life around the world. The future will certainly not be easy, but as you come home in the pale dawn, the future seems quite bright. Thank you very much. This is it. This was a very, very shortened and a very, rushed run through this story, but I think it has given you a chance to see how our game book works and how, with very simple means, because as you see, this is a short story that is not it's not very complex, and if you had a chance to discover the how it's knitted together, you would also see that it's easier and simpler than it might look. So at this point, I'm going to transfer us back to the plenary, because I know that the other groups, I know that Joanna has finished, and I think Dariusz is also getting there or finished already. And in the plenary room, there will be time for Q&A. Thank you very much. Okay, I made sure that all the groups finished. So here we are, we're back in the plenary, and let's give ourselves some time to gather, because the rooms are in the process of closing now. As soon as everyone's back, I'm happy to take questions and answers.
Yeah, I guess we could, when everyone is back, maybe start with the ones that we had in the chat.
Great.
Right.
Great idea.
Yeah, we can begin with the one from Justin. And then there was a contribution also by Sean. I think they're both kind of talking about the same thing. Oh yeah, I see that there are quite a few questions already. Mm-hmm. I might just start taking them. So the first one by Justin Souls. Well, I understand that the scenario is meant to shift someone's thinking from the expected future. Does it also require that someone take action based on this shifted mindset? Yeah, this is a big one. This is about, does foresight work, more or less, or do scenarios work? Well, we've definitely seen historically that even if the action is not immediate, or even if the course of history is not drastically altered, that scenarios have this power of changing, to shape policy and to shape political decisions. And I will refer to example, we are now celebrating the 50th anniversary of Limits to Growth. So the big Club of Rome report on futures, that was, a computer simulation of futures and the global population running out of resources. And as much as we see now, with the more we understand climate change and resource depletion and sweet water and water resources dwindling and all the crises that we have, we see that they were right about it. And it can clearly be shown how the scenarios produced in the 70s about a looming environmental crisis have helped to bring about the environmentalism and the first legislation like Clean Water Act in the US. So yeah, well, is it required? It would be good. It doesn't always happen. I've seen clients for whom, the shift in mindset didn't materialize sometimes, or even if it materialized, it was not enough to take bold decisions. But the majority of organizations that I've worked with used scenarios to really reframe their thinking and make actual changes into strategy, if this is a good answer for you, Justin. So, Shaun Sandhu, related to question by Justin, how do we measure the efficacy and impact of scenario planning? Is that related to someone taking action? Well, there are two answers. Of course, you can use psychometric techniques
do ex ante and ex post survey to see and try to measure if someone's perception of the problem changed. And it's not perfect. It's a way to go if you're working with a big group and you need some to show if what you did worked or not. But it's an ongoing question, and there is research coming about this regularly. Not everyone is interested, but I'm interested to learn how to measure the impact of foresight. I don't have an easy answer to this, but what I said about responding to Justin's question is also applies here. Next, everyone learns differently, some better in person, some by reading. There is no one best way to learn. Absolutely. I subscribe to this idea. And this is why I believe sometimes the over-reliance on live workshops promotes people, it's not exactly neurodiversity focused, because there are people who are introverts by nature and who don't thrive in group situations, who would rather have, a puzzle to solve or a problem to solve on their own as a way of interacting with future scenarios than do it in a group. So this is also one more advantage of using individual game books as in addition or complementarily, yes, or replacing, in some contexts, replacing a live situation, a social situation. Next, yes, Black Mirror Bandersnatch is a game book. That's right. It's not the only movie that is interactive that is a game book too. There is a whole platform called ECO, E-K-O, that has interactive movies. Although most of them are rather, very, very simple. Julio Cortázar's, yes, Rayuela, yes, that's right. This is the book I mentioned. And there were many series, especially of science fiction and fantasy books that were game books. English, German, Polish. Ilias Kastritis, sorry. By this way, operationalizing the scenarios even with a noble organizational purpose to accelerate foresight capacity using scenario archetypes like data for futures, yes. How do you engage the thinking process and teach the mind muscle to perpetuate its capability to imagine the futures, understand weak signals, anticipate, and thus make more informed choices because of the understanding of plausibility? Wow. So Elias, this is it. Like I said at the outset, you can use data archetypes. You can use deductive scenarios. The 4 or the 9, or as many as you want. My problem is with different level of engagement of the thinking process and using this mind muscle. What we didn't like was that some people who are involved, so in sort of privileged position of being involved in the scenario making process, they have ample time and they have dedicated, service of facilitators to help them use these mind muscles, and the others are getting a book. So by introducing the game books, we want to to give a better opportunity to use this mind muscle for people who are not directly involved with in the scenario making process. Does it answer your question, Elias, or not really? Tell me.
Well, I don't. The question is that you have to accelerate the learning process, as we said, for these people that you are saying, is that you use the kind of nominal scenarios as you did through a choice, an interactive book, let's say.
Yeah.
So we have a conscious choice. So we are driving through a future, let's say, navigating through a future, a story, an unfolding story. But this is preset.
Yeah. Okay. Now I know what to. Now I know what to tell you.
So what do we get out from the learning, the process of understanding the future? Not through the use of the language of scenarios. Let's say that we have these plausibles, but we make them our own. It's not preset for us, pre-designed for us.
Yeah. Now I hope you will not take as dodging your question, because I'm not going to dodge your question. But I subscribe to what, in some context, Real Miller says in his work on futures literacy, that we still are too attached to the concept of plausibility and forecasting in scenario making. The scenarios I used with you, we worked on them for months with a set of experts, trying to get a level of plausibility and to transfer this feeling of plausibility. But deep in my heart, I don't have much care for plausibility of scenarios, because for me, scenarios are tools, and they can be completely absurd if your audience accepts it. And if your audience wants more plausible scenarios, you use more plausible scenarios. I think this is like a slider that you can choose whether you're using scenarios that are plausible because the situation calls for it, or if you see that with this different group and with this different purpose of the process, you can do something more wild. So I feel that as futurists, we can be flexible about the level of plausibility that we set for a scenario making process. Would that be more?
Yes, I fully agree with you. That's why you use the social learning environment, which is a socially constructed future, meaning that we test the plausibility limits of our own perception, let's say, with others. So that's why it's a social.
And in our game books, this is mediated by voting. Because if I were to run a debriefing session now on how you voted, we could go on for several hours, seeing how some people believe something to be more realistic or more preferred. And in different scenarios, we can have different dilemmas, yes. Whether in the future, do you trust a computer, or in the future, you don't trust a computer because you believe the computer will be more evil or more good than now, or because you have a general apprehension of machines and you don't trust them. So for this, this is why we have this voting, and then we capture data and we can talk with people about why they voted, so what they consider plausible, what they consider preferable, what they consider attractive or good or bad.
I see. Thanks.
Now about groupthink phenomenon going in there. Yeah, in this situation, absolutely. When we were showing the results in real time, I believe that it was possible, with all due respect, that in some cases somebody voted because the others voted like this, or somebody voted to be contrary. In this situation, I think we can accept this.
I'm just gonna jump in for a second. So we have the last 2 minutes, and in case some people have to leave already, I would just say goodbye to them now, because I see that some people are leaving. But if you want to stay a little bit longer to explore some more questions, please stay behind. I think maybe as a finishing question for the people before they're leaving, I think Justin's one here about if the game books are supposed to be explored individually or in a group setting might be a good question for everyone before we go into some more afterwards.
Sure, Annika. We work in both setups. Sometimes they are done individually as a prologue to a session that we're having with a client. Sometimes people go through them individually simultaneously, so that we can debrief and compare the results in a group. And sometimes we have these voting situations, several groups around several tables, or in an online setup, where a group needs to come to an agreement or agree to disagree on something. And then this is how the story progresses. It's a design choice. And we've worked in all setups and more.
Okay, great. Thank you. Then I think at this point, I'm going to say goodbye to the people that need to leave punctually. But really inviting everyone to stay behind and talk a little bit more until Kacper has had enough. And
yeah, let's exhaust the list of questions in chat, but I hope to hear from you, because I feel like I've been speaking non-stop for a long time, and you have a voice in chat, but as as humans, we also, well, who knows, maybe it's Polipeti who is putting up these questions.
Who knows? Yeah, you can also unmute yourself if you want to ask directly into the Just
you can use the reaction to raise your hand, and I will stop doing what I'm doing, and I will answer your question. So, Elias, yes, we've the groupthink. Yes, we've addressed this. It's difficult to think it's okay when being forced into versus chosen. Yes, Lacey. You see a bit of how, and I see your raised hand, Naveen Kumar Patabiraman, and I will as soon let me just finish this one, and I will hear your question. So forced versus chosen. You've noticed that in the story there are some situations where you have the choice and where you don't have the choice. That's true. What we, in designing the story, where we give choice and where we don't give choice. We give choice in situations that give us some relevant dilemmas about the scenario. How you understand the scenario. Are you okay with what happens in this future, or are you not okay with it? Do you believe kids go to school or kids don't go to school? It's this one hasn't been featured in this game book, but it could be featured in a different one. So as you see, we are not as much interested in giving you a completely free hand of shaping the story and creating a huge decision tree with 100 different endings, depending on whether you want to help Marek find Sarah or not. And we just assume some things to get the story moving. A bit like in a video game, we want to give as much of freedom as possible in things that are relevant to the study. And we want you to have it as simple and as much a straight line as possible in everything. That it's not easy to strike the sweet spot between the two, and we're still improving. The new set of game books that will be released soon is a little different, and it's more simple in some places and more gives more freedom in others. What would have happened if we joined the resistance? Who knows? Well, has there been any group that joined the resistance? But a full group? Asha?
Yeah, actually our group joined the resistance. So, well, the game book stops when we join the resistance. So it just, tells us that we're preparing to fight Polipeti, but we don't know how the resistance goes.
Yes, and depending on whether you had the chip or not, there's also a slightly different ending. Okay, next, Deborah, thank you. Wouldn't everyone who watches Hollywood movies pick the resistance? Well, our group didn't pick the resistance. AI is always evil in films. Any advice how to get started creating your own game books? Also good links. Yeah, I say how we went about it is we Googled it 2 years ago, and we went on a very long journey. There are some tools that help. There's software that helps in creating game books. We've developed our software for distribution, so for giving access and capturing data online, and this is what you've seen in the breakout groups. But we also went further, and we've created hardware for voting in live sessions. So if you want to know more about it, just let me know, and we'll show you what we got. So hardware for, you can have a workshop with 300 people at 30 tables of 10 people each who are simultaneously using our specially designed, very attractive hardware device for voting on how they want the story to progress. In a corporate government, so Hajar Hams Eddin, in a corporate government setting, how these game books can be adopted. I mean, is a company doing strategic foresight? Do you deliver workshops to the teams, or do you work on reports and recommendations? We do everything. And in many cases, we start with a primer like this, something, to get people's mind wander and to train their creative muscle. And at the end, there is a very formal report on, the future of whatever, on the future of border control, or on the future of the cities, or on the future of the changing needs of over-the-counter drug clients, customers. We do many projects every year, and actually it's good. Sometimes if there is opportunity and if there is budget, I believe it's really good to start with something, to get people's mind working, and like this interactive fiction that you've. Oddly enough, as an online tool, it could very easily shared with scaled up to the entire organization. Yes. I designed workshops for up to 500 people, and we've had this particular tool work with big groups too. So yeah, it scales. It's one of the strengths. How many scenario variants are there? Do all the paths converge or spread into a wide range of ending? For practical reasons, we've had in the past implementations where we had many different endings, and we've worked with game books that converged into just one, creating a bit of an illusion of choice. It seems very attractive to create a story that really diverges. But then in implementation, you realize that people are going to go through one or two, maybe 3 endings. And if you have 20 different endings, they never get to learn the others. So maybe this is not so cool, because you've worked so hard on creating all these intricate differences in all the endings, but people don't get to see them. So it's, it's a trade-off. I wanted to, again, Sean Sandu, ask about research process that goes into creating these game books. How do research with niche communities and subcultures that are really living the future? Yeah. At 4CF, we don't have much of an ethnographer's nerve, frankly speaking. We mostly work with experts, and we don't just treat them as experts, a priori. We try to, for instance, using game books or using different techniques to get their minds working in the right way. In some cases, we did participatory processes with, that were open to even big groups of stakeholders. We once did a work on futures of transport infrastructure in a town approximately 100,000 people. So this one was participatory, and of course there is desk research that goes into this. So I'm very happy to use. I would rather use somebody else's ethnographic research into digital nomads or whoever you want than do this on ourselves. But this is just a choice. It's a business choice. This is something that this is how we go about it.
Thank you.
And Justin, Justin Souls, how you approach community subcultures who aren't included in the mainstream or prefer to stay on the margins? I think I've addressed this in the previous question. Just for info, famous children book writer who uses interactive books to imagination and create agency. Eugene Trivizas. Good to know. I'll note it down. Do you ever run through them repeatedly, like on Groundhog Day scenario, trying to work toward a desirable outcome? This is a question by Peter Vasilko. it's technically possible, and sometimes we, like I said in my group, we encourage people to restart and see for a different outcome. In an event where you want to have, you know, experience, you'd rather do one. In a more, you know, situation behind closed doors, when you have this as part of a bigger process, it's I think it's more productive to go to do this Groundhog Day, like you so aptly put it.
I just remember, I think Naveen Kumar was trying to also raise a question earlier.
I'm sorry, Naveen. I know I feel so. Yeah, you're still here. Yes, please, please. Yeah.
No problem. It was interesting to listen to also the others' questions. Okay, so my question was basically, first of all, thank you for this very good presentation on this Gamebooks and the Foresight. Actually, I'm also doing the course on the Foresight and the technology management. So in a part of first semester, we already used science fiction novels to create the scenarios. So that was actually a first project or what we did on the Foresight. So it was very interesting. That's the reason for me to join this session. So I was trying to bridge the gap between what I learned and what I'm trying to understand from your lecture or from this presentation. So there we used all the movies and novels which was already available, and we were trying to figure it out, what the things which are already written in those novels and novellas and what is actually present in our current world, and how long did it take for the transformation. And we are trying to map those timelines for those movies and the actual event has taken place. So it was really fascinating to see that what the things which has happened in the past or written in the books or coming in the movies slowly taking shapes in life. So my question is, we went through the scenarios with the chat session as a separate breakout session. So I was trying to understand if the foresight, if we are making for future scenarios of a company through the process, and how at that particular point of time, at the end of the session, how this game book would help those particular scenarios to get them involved.
Yeah.
And why do you need to convince at that point? Like we had an option A or B here, but as you said, the scenarios must be an experience, not just another report on the table.
Yeah.
So the scenarios already, when we go through it, so it is already, they are in the mode, they should be able to understand what's happening and what it might happen. And that should make them take the decision accordingly, or if they're trying to find, because it's constantly changing, the micro, macro, and mega trends, it's constantly changing, and it is very exponential growth. So if that is the case, then it's up to the managers to take a rightful decision, and we can help them to navigate. I see this as a tool, this game books or any scenarios, I see this as a right tool to better involve the decision makers to get into the scenario of what we have made it based on micro, macro, and mega trends, or the company's own SWOT, like strength and weaknesses, and based on their characteristics, understanding of the company and their competencies within their environment and outside their environment, maybe could be on a pestle aspect or away from the pestle aspect. So when they get those informations, then this, I feel this game books, what you told, it's a very good insight to get them involved, rather than just, even though if you make a very good scenario planning session for 2 days, and maybe at the third day, they might say, okay, fine, it's done. And then maybe I have something on my mind. Let's do it. That's okay. Let's do as business as usual.
Okay. Can I answer? Because there are three things that you mentioned. But first, I have a question to you. Where do you follow your course? I wonder.
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
You said that you had you are in some kind of program, and you started with sci-fi. Where is this program being delivered? What institution?
Okay, so I'm studying actually like Technische Hochschule Ingolstadt in Germany.
Okay, yes.
This is a
Technische Hochschule Ingolstadt. Okay, right. Yeah, good. So First, thank you very much for asking the question about, for mentioning science fiction. I didn't put this whole debate about can you use science fiction in the futures in my presentation because I didn't want to overload it. Okay. But this has been a topic. And if you go back upon the recordings from World Future Studies Federation meeting in Berlin last year, and also we will publish another recording of a session I had with Karl-Heinz Steinmüller from Z-Punkt and with Thomas Lombardo. This is a topic that is quite hot now, and I am very glad to see that there is growing appreciation of fiction in general in foresight. We also did a report for City of Wrocław last year, and we did stories, science fiction stories about speculative futures, stories about the future of Wrocław. So this I absolutely subscribe that using these fictions, the growth in interest in using these fictions is great. Now, how it works in a corporate setup.
Right.
We did a gamebook implementation with one of our clients, Veolia, a French multinational who in Poland has more than 60 facilities and employs something like 5,000 people. So they have this seminar for the top 100 managers. And in this scenario, in this seminar, we had scenarios of city infrastructure for the future and gamebooks that were very lighthearted, that touched upon many corporate taboos like alcohol and other things that normally are not featured in workshops on strategic planning. But we prepared the scenarios exactly to include as many as possible, as many questions, dilemmas, unknowns, uncertainties, technological risks, emergent technologies, disruptions in city ecosystems. We've put everything in there. Why? Because after each of the game books, we did a big debriefing with this group of 100 managers, asking them why they've chosen so, how it refers to company strategy, how it refers to company policy, how it refers to the vision, how it reframes and changes their perception of decarbonization goals or other stuff. So depending on what is expected by the client, in some cases with corporate clients, we use game books to cut across the complexity of all the questions about the future and make it more digestible, make it easier to digest. Something better than if you had a one-day session asking, okay, so now let's move to item 124B, that is, will in the future people use diesel generators for heating in mid-sized cities because they have no infrastructure, is derelict and it doesn't work, yes? So instead, as a more attractive packaging with a story, with a love story, with a crime story, with all kinds of narratives. So this is how we used it in the corporate setup. But also I mentioned in my presentation this implementation for Gdańsk port. This is also a big company, but what they were looking for was something absolutely out of their strategic environment. They didn't want to do anything about logistics. They didn't want to do anything about, they wanted scenarios that don't work for them. They wanted scenarios of the world around them so that they can figure out how in this world, the freight, the freight forwarding, containers, global movements of goods and all that, how it all works. So this is why they've chosen to work with the scenarios, including the new tech giant, the one that you just went through, because they want something completely generic that is absolutely not tailor-made, so that they can figure out from there, as the board of this company, they can figure out, okay, how this may affect our business. And so your third question. Yeah, I subscribe to being thorough and very analytical in the foresight work. What I don't subscribe to is trying to have all the, I'm reluctant about situations where we have sort of death of creativity by analysis, because by introducing many models that are typical for strategic management, like you mentioned, using the PESTLE, using the SWOT, using including trends, mega trends, anti-trends, hyper trends, whatever, using it all, it's often creates a situation where the outcome is reductionist, because it does not allow for, you know, things that are outside of the outcome of the analysis. So as much as we use PESTLE segmentation and other techniques, and as much as we use megatrends in this, I believe that it's also valid, like I said to Elias earlier, to have a scenario completely as a model, you know, just a tool. You don't ask a hammer if it's, you know, good for your company or not, if it takes into account the strengths and weaknesses and the opportunities and threats in the strategic environment. It's just a hammer. You just use it to drive down nails. So you can also use scenarios, I believe, as just a prompt to ignite the kind of creativity you need in strategic processes. So of course it's a sort of a yin, yeah, answer, yes and no. And just like with the corporate implementations, we did both out-of-the-box scenarios like this ones, and we did tailor-made scenarios with Gamebooks. Is it okay, Naveen Kumar? You feel like I tricked you, or like you feel like I answered some of your questions?
Yeah, it was insightful. I was just trying to understand the corporate aspect of using Gamebooks. So that was one thing which I was trying to understand.
Good. Did anyone else raise their hands? No? Okay, so let's go back to the questions.
Let's maybe do one. Kacper,
more.
You can choose your final favorite question.
Yes, Sylvain Cotong. How do you see the different approaches to work with scenarios? Signals and drivers of change, scanning, sense making, defining critical uncertainties, matrix building, futures literacy approach. I don't think that futures literacy approach is what you put in here, by my experience with futures literacy. And I will. This is something. Is Hajar still there? Yes, she's still there, because she will have a scenario class on Saturday, and her friend Gianfranco Riva, who was here as well. You know what? I think there is no single answer. I know that there are people who prefer Dator's archetype scenarios because they feel that they have this sort of political thing in them. This, this moral weight of collapse or transformation. Are we doomed, or can we transcend our fate? There are people who prefer 2x2 scenario matrix building because they are easy to learn, they are easy to explain, and you can go as deep as you want. The 4 places on the matrix are real rabbit holes. You can write books about each one of them. Expected, preferred, another. Now it would be easier to tell you what kind of scenarios I don't like, or I don't use. And I will once again refer to Real Miller, who not even in a paper, but in one of the presentations, he used this isoprobabilistic and isopreferable, a very, very high call for scenario making, that your scenarios should fulfill 2 requirements, or at least 1. They should not differ much in probability, because if you have one scenario that is very highly probable and another one that is a complete wild card, then you are projecting a situation, a sort of epistemological, cognitive situation on whoever will use these scenarios, where you want them to focus on what is realistic, plausible, more likely, and the wildcards, wildcards are wildcards. Very unlikely to happen, but still worth being considered. Well, what do you really prepare for? Do you prepare for a world where climate change stops out of itself? because, you know, there is some regulation mechanism that we are not aware of. As for this science, it doesn't make much sense. Yeah, who wants to? It's the thing that climate change denialists want to go for. Yes, it doesn't seem very practical. So if you are given a choice as a user of scenarios of something highly probable and highly improbable, this is bad. I consider this bad practice. So this is why I think scenarios should have this isoprobabilistic. They should be more or less in the same channel of, you know, probability. And if you can do it in some contexts, you may also want to have them isopreferable, so that there is no good, bad, and ugly. There is no, you know, mama bear, papa bear, Goldilocks, and you know, there are hundreds of metaphors like this probably for scenarios. You want to make your scenarios, each one of them, ambiguous, none of them positive, none of them negative. And this is something we did with Saint-Gobain, this big French construction material and glass company. We worked with them on the future of cities last year, and people were surprised, not in Saint-Gobain, but the readers of the report were surprised. You know, you present 4 scenarios of the future of cities, but none of them is positive, and none of them is really negative. You know, it all depends. Well, I think we did a fine job there, because they were isoprobabilistic and iso-desirable. So whatever method you choose, whether you go for 2x2 matrix or whether you go by data scenarios or, you know, abductive, deductive, inductive, you know, scenariology applied, suit yourself. But I think that these two, if you want to have them isoprobabilistic and, if possible, isopreferable, then you will have done a good job. Sylvain, you're nodding your head, so I feel like I've answered.
No, thank you for your point of view on this. Very interesting.
Thank you. So, Anika, I think you need to, you know, you're probably putting Phoenix in the Zoom machine to keep us going. Yeah.
Exactly.
But we've overrun by 26 minutes already, so I don't want to stretch.
Which is amazing. I mean, this means that I think people got a lot of value out of it, and it was a super interesting conversation to see so much happening in the chat as well. Like, I wish we could just continue and answer everything, but I think any questions you have further from this, I'm sure if you reach out to Kacper from LinkedIn or Twitter, I'm sure he'll be open to continue the conversation. I will be publishing the recording to answer the question, and I will try get all the insights and the links that were also exchanged in the chat. I will gather those and send an email to all the people that participated tonight, so that's not lost. Yeah, and I just want to say a big thank you to you, Kacper, for presenting and introducing us to this method. I think really by the interaction, you can see that this is a really great way of dealing with scenarios, and I think yeah, really making that bridge between creation and actually having to make a decision and like using it to get that perspective. And yeah, also to the facilitators.
Yes, thanks to Asha, Joanna, and Darek for facilitating the breakout rooms. Thank you very much.
And to everyone joining us tonight, especially when it's the hottest day of the year so far. I really appreciate the commitment. Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining, and then I'll see you hopefully next time.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Great.
Ciao.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.